Thanks a lot for your time, Vijay. I'm sure you have a lot of requests, but this is
No, come on, man. Listen, this is not a request.
yeah.
You ask me to come, I'll come. Okay. This is not a request. I understand exactly what the situation is. Yeah. You get
Yes,
my
yes,
point.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Thank you.
No, it's
How's
different.
Santiago?
I
You're in
mean,
Santiago now, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we have a coming up soon. We are going to have a far right leader who will eclipse Javier Milei and company
Yep.
because his father was actually a Nazi and he is actually a supporter of Augusto Pinochet. So
Great.
yeah, I mean, and I mean the thing is, it's even nonsensical to talk about Palestine in Chile because
Mm,
in Chile there's the largest Palestinian population outside the Middle East. Yeah, 500,000. And the Palestinians here, largely Christians who came during the Ottoman period, are actually fairly right wing in orientation. So,
mm.
like the leader of the Palestinian community is a guy of the right. Yeah, but they're super pro Palestine. So, this confuses Chile's Palestine policy. So that
Yes.
even though there's a right wing president, he can't really be pro Israel.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. I
It's
remember being
it's
there. Yeah.
it's super confusing, right? Because people generally think, oh, Palestinians, they got to be radical. Uh,
Mm.
no, no, there's a lot of right wing Palestinians in Latin America. I mean,
Well,
and right
look
wing
at Honduras
Arabs.
and El Salvador, right?
Oh my God, Nayib Bukele, and
Yeah,
then Daniel Noboa, and
exactly.
yeah, so
Ex
I mean, you can't romanticize any people, right? It's
yeah,
about politics.
100%. Well, Vijay, so just so that we can, I mean, I see that people are joining. I'm sure that people are also watching on YouTube. We'll talk about this, of course, as we proceed, but I just wanted to give some kind of a formal kind of an introduction. So uh, we have also the translator here, so just in Arabic. مساء الخير للجميع. احنا اليوم محظوظين سعداء بوجود الدكتور فيجي برشاد معنا، يحدثنا عن الاحداث في امريكا اللاتينيه، وبالتحديد ما حصل في فنزويلا، ونحاول هيك مع بعض نفهم كمان هذا التاريخ من آم، الهجمات العنيفة على أمريكا اللاتينية ومنطقة الكاريبي. بس للتذكير والتنويه، توجد ترجمة بالإمكان تغيير اللغة. أدناه من عند يعني شعار العالم، تحويل من اللغة العربية للإنجليزية. So Vijay, I guess we want our oil back, as Trump said, a few weeks back. There was a video where he was talking about this. There is a long history, of course, of the U.S. involvement in South Central America and the Caribbean region. Of course, this history is not, it's not also benign. It's full of violence. It's full of blood. It's full of regime overthrow. But at the same time, we woke up on January 3rd with news that perhaps some of us have anticipated some form of violence, some form of a military attack, let's say. But we woke up to the news of the US bombing Venezuela, not only bombing Venezuela, but also kidnapping the president, Nicolas Maduro, his wife as well. We just saw the news about them appearing in a New York City court today. You and I were just talking about, also, of course, like the CIA's and the US's kind of rendition programs that Arabs and Palestinians have actually lived through on their ways to the US's multiple prisons, including Guantanamo. Of course, this event did not happen out of the blue. The US has been escalating its rhetoric and, of course, its armada surrounding Venezuela, including the bombing of boats. As Trump mentioned, this was done in a way to kind of combat that drug trafficking, which I think I'm sure we will talk about this rhetoric that Trump has been touting since not only this current term, but also his previous term. And I think many questions remain unanswered, of course, that we hope to kind of make sense with you today. How do we make sense of this kidnapping? how do you understand the attack on Venezuela and what comes for the region? And trying to contextualize this event historically as well, this long history of the US's intervention in the region. And Vijay, we're very honored to have you here. Just people know you, of course, but so that you are a historian, a journalist. You are also the executive director of the Tricontinental, the Institute for Social Research. You're an author of multiple books, and I think we're very honored and privileged to have you here. We would have loved to have you also in person at Perzate. So yeah, I guess just to get us started, Vijay, tell us a bit about this context. It would be nice to discuss also the US's long history of violence in Latin America. You've met Chavez and Maduro, of course, and other leaders as well, so you have insights as well. So yeah, the floor is yours, Vijay, and thanks once again for joining us.
No. Listen, I consider the Perzate my home. Away from home, it's just a little difficult to get there. That's the only thing. I take very seriously the university on a rock, but it's difficult to get there, as you know better than others. I just want to say that we published in November a really good dossier on the culture of resistance in Palestine. And for this dossier, we interviewed the great Muhammad Bakri, who died, as you know, just recently. What a guy. What a person. I mean, real jewel of humanity. I just want to say that we're going to miss people like that. He was so generous to our team. He was so kind and nice and polite. And despite the fact that the Israelis hounded him for over 20 years, he just didn't care. He just didn't care. He just did what he wanted to do. That for me is, it's a cliche. People talk about smooth and all of that. I'm not really. Lots of people give up. Yeah, lots of people get exhausted. But Muhammad Bakri, what a guy. Yeah, lion among all of us. Okay, so that's there. I was just saying to you, it's like the Venezuelans woke up to a Palestinian reality on the 3rd of January. The first thing is, people should understand that South America has never been bombed by the United States. Panama has, yes. Central American countries have, but no South American country has been bombed. Yes. Countries have had coup d'etats. Chile, where I live, and I'm speaking to you from Santiago. Of course, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, they've had coups, but no direct US bombardment. So this is interesting. It's interesting because the Venezuelans never really experienced the depth and the intensity of US bombardment. What do I mean by that? I woke up at 3 a.m. for other reasons. I look at my phone. My colleague in Venezuela says we are being bombed. He starts FaceTiming. So I watched out of his window the bombing. Let me tell you something. Been to Iraq and so on, been to Gaza 2014 after the bombardment. The intensity of 150 planes that have completely taken out the electricity and communication system in Venezuela for that duration, destroyed all the air defense systems in a flash, 150 planes jamming all communications and dropping bombs. Operation Absolute Resolve against Venezuela was more intense than shock and awe against Baghdad in 2003. We haven't talked about this much, the intensity of the bombing. Yeah, they flattened buildings all across Caracas. Pictures are just beginning to come out. The Venezuelans are also a little scared of showing the amount of destruction. Yeah, they are feeling protective. They want to say we could defend. They couldn't defend anything. When you spend over $1 trillion a year on military equipment, you have developed military equipment that is more than lethal. And the Palestinians in Gaza have witnessed that every day for the last 3 years. And in fact, even before, because the Israelis are using American bombs, but the Americans have better stuff than the Israelis. And by the way, if the Israelis could firstly identify and track mid-level Hezbollah operatives and blow up their pagers, do you think they don't know where you are? You know, I think, oh, I'm so clever. If I'm going to talk to somebody, I'm going to keep my phone in the other room or put it in the refrigerator. Forget it. They know what you're up to. Their surveillance is at a higher level than you can imagine. Yeah, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm just saying that the ruthlessness with which they came into Venezuela has to be appreciated. This was not a question of why couldn't the Venezuelans shoot down a helicopter. Really, you know, Lebanon doesn't have a military, barely. It has barely any air defense systems. Israeli planes fly over Lebanon every day, drones flying over Lebanon all the time. Yeah. Why would you imagine that Venezuela, under sanctions for 20 years, has been able to upgrade air defense systems? Who is going to do all that? The Russian air defense systems were destroyed in a flash. Okay, when hyper-imperialism wants to destroy you, it can destroy you. That's the moral of the January 3rd story. Secondly, when the Chinook helicopters landed next to where Maduro was, those Delta troops had trained in Puerto Rico with the same, they built a replica of the house. They built a replica of the house in Puerto Rico. They trained in that house. Yeah, they knew exactly what they were doing. Over 50 soldiers died trying to protect the president. Okay, 32 of them Cuban soldiers died trying to protect the president. They just couldn't do it. You know, they couldn't face these machine-made soldiers. If you look at Delta forces, they don't look like humans. They look like they walked out of a science fiction film. You know, completely armored. They're like knights from the 18th century with the metal suits, except these suits are made of titanium. Your bullets aren't going to penetrate them. Yeah, they just came in, they took Maduro, they took Celia Flores, threw them in the helicopter and they left. This is not Panama 1989. This is 2026. Their weapons are much more lethal. And the thing is, I don't even know why we are doing this webinar, because Palestinians have seen this. I was just saying to you, which Palestinian political leader who has not surrendered to Zionist settler colonialism has been able to really survive? You know, they let you out, they put you in, you're in administrative detention. Ahmad al-Sadat, what is it? 23, 24 years he has been in jail. Yeah. Barghouti, 23, 24 years in jail. Yeah. You are a Hamas, somebody, they know where you are. They pummel you. They assassinate you. They know where everybody is. I'm sorry to say it like this. We can't fight them militarily. We have to fight them politically. Venezuela right now is in an extraordinarily weak situation. Trump has said, if you don't surrender to me completely, I'm going to pulverize you. And the government that's there now had to take this seriously. But this government is unwilling to surrender. The new president, Delcy Rodriguez, is the daughter of Jorge Rodriguez, who was a major Marxist-Leninist politician in Venezuela who was assassinated. He had created a group called the Socialist League. Delcy Rodriguez and Nicolas Maduro were cadre of that organization. They were both in this Marxist-Leninist formation. Delcy Rodriguez and Nicolas Maduro are very close politically. There is no real divide. She is now the interim or acting president. In the press conference that she held, she was sitting next to a man who is the Minister of Interior, Diosdaros, very important figure, the leading Chavista. He is one of the 6 people on the US government indictment in the Southern District of New York. The very fact that Delcy Rodriguez put Diosdado right next to her in a press conference is indicative to the country. I am not going to surrender to the Americans. On the other hand, it's important to recognize they will have to make some tactical adjustments. They are going to have to tactically make a deal with the oil companies. Maduro is gone to New York. Now it's up to the process in New York. And I'll talk about that in a minute. They are going to campaign and say you have to return him. In fact, he was taken by a violation of UN Charter Article 2.4, Article 2.7. He was taken in violation of the Organization of American States, Article 16. He was taken in violation of the head of state immunity. You see, the only way a head of state immunity can be overtaken is if you have an International Criminal Court warrant. Who has an International Criminal Court warrant, I might ask you? Well, little old Benjamin Netanyahu, who was in the United States, does not have head of state immunity. He has an International Criminal Court warrant. Nicolas Maduro does not. So he was taken illegally. If the judge in New York has any sense of judicial propriety, he would dismiss this case and free Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. But, that's a political issue. We don't know what's going to happen. From the standpoint of Venezuela right now, they are going to have to make some tactical adjustments. And I agree with them, because I don't think they can fight the United States militarily. They have to fight politically. That means one step back in order to take two steps forward. What do I mean? Right now, the entire Western Hemisphere is undergoing a major shift. The pink tide of Hugo Chavez is in retreat, and the angry tide of the far right is on the ascendancy. In Argentina, neo-fascist Javier Milei is the president. Zionist is the president. In Chile, Jose Antonio Cast, whose father was an actual Nazi, is going to become the president, far right-wing. He cannot be an open Zionist because of the Palestinian brethren that you have in Chile. But up the coast in the Andes, in Bolivia, in Ecuador, in Peru, there are right-wing governments. There are right-wing governments across South America and Central America. This is a new angry tide. In Brazil and Colombia, there will be elections this year. Likely in Brazil, Mr. Lula will run again and win, most likely. But the Senate will be captured by the Bolsonaristas, the far right-wing political forces of Jair Bolsonaro, who's in jail right now. But his party is going to win the Senate. It already controls the Chamber of Deputies. So Lula's ability to govern is going to be very much constrained. He's going to have to make deals with the right. That means he will be pulled to the right. In Colombia, Gustavo Petro cannot run again. It's not possible in Colombia. His successor of their political force, Ivan Cepeda, is a political person. But if he has to run against the far right's Vicky Davila, and the United States interferes there, which they will, Vicky Davila will win. That means in most of Latin America, the right is on the ascendant. So Venezuela has experienced extreme violence from the United States, although it's still extreme violence in a small pocket. But the example of what they can do has been shown. Trump said that. We can come another night, he said. We can come 2 nights more if you want. We're going to stop now, but we can come again. He was scary in the press conference, okay? They have demonstrated what they can do, yeah? Secondly, Venezuela is politically isolated. That's the second important thing in the region. The third thing, just a few hours before the attack on Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, his foreign minister, Ivan Gilpin, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez were at a very important meeting with an extremely high delegation from China. Qi Xingliang, who is the special envoy of Xi Jinping for Latin America, was in Caracas. He came with the head of the Latin America desk in the Chinese Foreign Ministry and the deputy of that desk. The three of them, with the ambassador and a very large team, met with Maduro and his team. They spent several hours together. They discussed the 97 agreements that they have in common, the $70 billion investment the Chinese have in Venezuela that the Chinese have made. They discussed all of this, the security situation and so on. They had a photo opportunity, released the picture immediately on Twitter. This is Nicolas Maduro standing next to Xi Jinping's representative, who spent that night in Caracas, and the United States still bombed that night. Maybe it was also a message to China. I don't think so. I think the weather was good, they went in. But still, they knew that Xiong was there. They knew he was in Caracas. They still bombed. It shows you that despite the shifts in the world order, we still live in what we in tricontinental call a hyper-imperialist world. We have never believed in the argument of multipolarity. It's an exaggeration. This is a hyper-imperialist world where there is a churning of the trade order, and therefore a new mood has appeared in the global south. We use the phrase, the new mood in the global south. There is no big emergence of Russia and China. No. China and Russia do not have military bases anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. Nobody could have protected the Venezuelans. Look, Russia couldn't even protect the government of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, despite the fact that they have an air base in Latakia. Okay, we should never exaggerate the realities. As people who are like me as a Marxist, I'm interested in the actual movement of history. I don't have an idealist view of history. It's an actual movement that we must track as scholars, as intellectuals, and so on. So this third point is important for us. It doesn't mean that, China is useless. Like people say, China did nothing to stop the genocide of the Palestinians. It's a very wrong statement, because underlying that statement is the assumption that China can do something. The assumption is, what can China do? Do you expect China to send a naval armada into the Mediterranean and try to break the US blockade of Gaza effectively? Yeah, the British and US blockade from Cyprus all the way down to Egypt. Do you think the Chinese should risk World War III for that? What is China supposed to do to stop this in Venezuela? Should they have sent ships into the Caribbean to contest the US Armada? Are you crazy? They don't have the ability to do that. The Russians could not have sent, a huge number of planes. They're busy fighting in Ukraine. They haven't even defeated the Ukrainians. Yeah. So we should not say things like they are useless. They have a limited capacity to do things. China, for instance, held a meeting of the 14 factions of the Palestinians. First time in decades that they all met and came together and started a process. That's a very important political advance, because I'm of the view that the solution to the Palestinian question right now is not about China or Russia. It's about Palestinians restarting a new political project, because Oslo destroyed the political project. Restarting a political is much more important than getting new guns. What's the point of guns if you don't have a political project? So we can't expect the Chinese Russians to save us. We have to save ourselves, build our own solidarity. And here's the last point. The problem in Latin America is not where are the Chinese, where are the Russians? It's where is the left in Latin America? The right is prevailing politically. The Pentecostals have entered society. They have given ordinary people a theory of criminality, or given ordinary people a theory of how to run your family and so on. It's a little bit like the appeal of the Muslim Brotherhood. When you're under extreme stress, these organizations enter working class and working poor families. They provide some small measure of sustenance because the state has collapsed. And they attract large numbers of people to right-wing ideas of the father is the main person and so on. This right-wing idea constructs for people what they feel the state should be. If you say in the home, the patriarchy must be reestablished, well, then you need a strong leader as your president or prime minister. And the left is being eclipsed because we are unable to organize at the family and community level, and we can't organize from above, having taken the state. So my feeling is right now, I feel that in Latin America, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, etc., under great threat, particularly the Cuban Revolution, under immense threat. They can collapse at any point, under immense threat. And that will mean that for a generation or more, Latin America will be given over to the right wing. And then Trump's vision in the national security document of the Monroe Doctrine with the Donald Trump corollary will come true. And this is the first step in realizing the Trump corollary.
Well, Vijay, this is a very bleak, accurate and bleak forecast for the future. I guess it's very it's sad, obviously, because there's a long history. You already alluded to this, of the US's involvement in the region. But of course, as you mentioned, we're in Palestine here. We're witnessing also the similar forms of violence and genocidal violence that has been unfolding in Palestine for decades. But I think so. I'm sure people here have a lot of questions. They've already written some, but I want to ask you two questions in a way, just to kind of give us also a sense of why particularly Venezuela. I know, Vijay, you've spoken about previously about the 2001 hydrocarbon law that Chavez had put in place. I think it might help us understand why Trump was so adamant about getting back quote unquote what's theirs, the oil, just so that we understand why has this been unfolding that quick. And I think the second question would be, of course, your question is right. Where is the left in Latin America? I think it's a question that we should be asking, I think, globally as well. But what, this is also might be a difficult question, but what can we anticipate now in Latin America, specifically for Cuba and for the remaining parts of what we could describe as, either the pink tide or the remnants of the Cuban Revolution, if I might say it that way. And then maybe we can have some questions, Vijay, from the audience.
You've asked an array of things, and let me very quickly summarize that so we can get more things. But you've asked really important and good questions. The first is, it's not just about oil, because there's enough oil in the planet. But Venezuela has the world's largest reserve of oil. The problem with the Bolivarian revolution of Hugo Chavez was not that they took the oil away from the oil companies, because Venezuela doesn't have any refining capacity. It exports crude oil. In fact, imports petroleum products. It never built a refining capacity. It's like a colony. And so it anyway has to use international oil companies to refine the oil. The issue wasn't that. It's what Venezuela was doing with the oil wealth. Previously, the oil wealth went to the oligarchs and the oil companies. Now, Venezuela was, through projects like PetroCaribe, was giving subsidized oil to Caribbean countries, to poor people in Latin America, and so on. And secondly, it was using the oil money to rebuild the international left. It was holding 5, 6, 8 conferences a year of left-wing movements. They would come, gather. I've been to so many of them, meet people from around the world, from the Congo, from this, that. Those connections built international solidarity in a way that, you can't do it without money. How are you going to have meetings with people and so on? Who's going to fly here and there? Let's take Palestinian solidarity. Okay, there's a reason why you're going to get a Palestinian flag put up in Zambia. Okay, it's not because some European or US groups, holding some conferences. No, it's because the Zambian Socialist Party is being trained as doctors in Venezuela. And part of the Venezuelan curriculum of cadre development is the Palestinian question. It's a fundamental. I haven't been into one Bolivarian office which doesn't have a Palestinian flag or picture of Kanafani or something. Yeah. And so that work of building international left solidarity was anathema, is anathema to the right wing. It is anathema. Just 2 days ago, or sorry, a day ago, yesterday, Fox News ran a story accusing me and others, saying that we are part of an international conspiracy to defend Maduro. And what they were angry about is that they said, from a military intelligence perspective, these people were very efficient because they were able to get people on message very quickly. There were protests in Nepal, protests all over the world. Yeah, huge demonstration in India. And the signs were similar in these countries. Yeah, and they were using slogans. So they blame me and 2, 3 other people, said they run an international conspiracy. Yes, exactly. It's true. It's absolutely 100% true. I'm not going to deny it. It's called solidarity. It's called internationalism. Welcome to it. On the last point, international solidarity for the Cuban Revolution needs to be amped up, and we need to link in a way that was done by the PLO in the 1960s. You know how the PLO linked Algeria, Palestine, and Vietnam into one struggle. Yeah, they had pictures of the Fedayeen next to a Vietnamese soldier, yeah, on the cover of a PLO magazine and so on. We need to link the Palestinian struggle today with the Cuban Revolution, because both of these are facing what I consider to be genocidal forms of violence. Different, they are not bombing Cuba, but Cuba has been under embargo since 1959 virtually. And the Palestinians virtually have been under an embargo since 1948. Occupation, certainly. Yeah, so I think politically, one needs to link the two. I mean, the massive waves of anti-Zionist, pro-Palestinian, solidarity has been incredible. The material character of it is limited, right? I mean, it's not been able to stop the Israeli violence and the US-backed violence and European complicity and so on. But the fact that it's mobilized a new generation around the world is very important. And I would like to link Cuba to this, to lift Cuba up into this.
Definitely, Vijay. Thanks so much. I think we could have some questions perhaps from the audience. I'm sure we'll continue the conversation. إذا في أي تساؤلات أو أسئلة بالإمكان يعني توجيهها في خلال Q&A، أو إذا في حدا بيرفع إيده في إمكانية تتحدثوا كمان توجهوا أسئلة للمتحدث بشكل مباشر. Vijay, you know that there's interpretation, right? You switch the channel? Okay. طيب. I'll read out the questions that are written, and then I'll go to Yazid, who raises his hand. So there's a question, Vijay, about the Venezuelan army. Would the Venezuelan army, in a way, this is how the question is formulated, would it stay kind of true to the kidnapped president, or would it kind of subject itself to a hegemony? And the second question, it says, I'll just read it out. Russia and China are thinking about themselves in a way. This is what it seems. Russia is in Ukraine, China is in Taiwan, and the US now has Colombia and Cuba, and later on Greenland. Do you think that there exists perhaps any form of kind of agreements between these three states, as if it's kind of a division of territorial influences? And yeah, let's go to Yazid. Yazid, تفضل إذا حابب تحكي شيء بشكل مباشر أو ممكن تكتب.
مرحبا.
تفضل. تفضل.
اوكي، شكرا كثير. طبعا السؤال اللي انا بدي اتطرق له بتعلق بالوضع الداخلي في فنزويلا. اكثر من تقرير عرض المشاكل اللي لها علاقه بفساد السلطه طبعا بعد تبوء مونرو السلطة وقبل، وإضافة لهجرة يعني مخيفة جدا للفنزويليين إلى خارج فنزويلا خلال العشر سنوات الأخيرة. كل العوامل هذه الداخلية من فساد وضعف كل ما يتعلق بمقومات الدولة، قديش برأيه طبعا المتحدث، وأشكره طبعا كثير على وصفه الدقيق والموضوعي للوضع داخل أمريكا اللاتينية في يعني في عدة من عدة زوايا، وهذا الإشي طبعا يعني زي ما أنت حكيت كمان يرسم صورة قاتمة للحالة اللي إحنا بنشهدها في العالم بالنسبة للتيارات اليسارية بالتحديد. فبرجع لأكمل السؤال إنه مدى يعني دور هذه العوامل في يعني خلينا نقول إضعاف الدولة من الداخل، بشكل إنه أعطت المجال لأي دولة زي أمريكا إنها تلاقي مبرر، سواء كان مبرر حسب ما اليوم عم نسمع بلائحة الاتهام اللي بتشمل عدة قضايا متهم بها الرئيس وزوجته. طبعا في المحكمة اليوم الصبح شفنا ظهوره. فبالتالي يعني بس حابب أعرف نظرته للوضع الداخلي، وقديش كان الوضع الداخلي ساهم بشكل مباشر في الكارثة اللي حدثت. شكرا.
شكرا يزيد. شكرا. Ishe, few questions, please.
Yeah, I mean, let's deal with the first one because it leads. Sorry, the third one, Yazid's question, because it leads to the first one and so on. So in 2013, in December 2012, Chavez had, I think, his third surgery for the cancer in Cuba. And he called for his then son-in-law, Jorge Ariaza, to bring the leadership of Venezuela to see him. And among them was the deputy president and foreign minister, Nicolas Maduro. And Chavez, begged Maduro to become the next president, saying that, look, I'm going to die. Chavez was only 58 years old, by the way. That's my age. Scary. He was such a great man. You know, in life I got the opportunity to meet two people that I so admire. One was Hugo Chavez and one was Fidel Castro. And it's difficult to say what they meant as people. You know, as a Marxist, I'm not meant to admit that individuals matter, but that's a very wrong interpretation of Marxism. Of course, individuals matter. They make an enormous difference in political movements. And Chavez was an extraordinary person. So imagine Nicolas Maduro sitting there in the hospital. Chavez says to him, Nicolas, you have to take over. Nicolas Maduro, a bus driver, leader of the bus drivers union. I've been in a bus with him driving, by the way. He did it for fun one day. A bus driver raised in a low middle class family. Father's a trade union leader. Mother was a devout Catholic teacher. He is told by a dying Hugo Chavez, you have to take over. He starts crying and says to Chavez, please don't make me do this. Chavez said, it's your historical responsibility. He becomes the president. Chavez dies in March of 2013. The next month, there's a special election for president. Maduro runs against Henry Capriles, the right-wing candidate. He barely beats Capriles, 50 to 49%. Very close election. Venezuela, extremely divided society. But he wins, 50 to 49. That, as usual, the right-wing said the election result is rigged. Listen, my friends, you are in Palestine. You remember Saddam's elections. You want to rig an election. You don't rig the election 50 to 49. You rig the election the way Mubarak used to rig an election. You win 99% of the vote. The Arab rigging of elections is 99, 98% of the vote. Why would you rig an election 50 to 40? Anyway, he wins the election, very tight election. Yeah. Everybody accepts that in Venezuela, it's an extremely divided society between the right and the left. It's very closely divided society. Even Chavez would win 55% to 40%. He didn't win 90%. Yeah. Maduro wins. Oil prices start to drop. In 2015, Barack Obama, liberal, signs an executive order which is the legal basis for the extreme sanctions against Venezuela. During the pandemic, the United States puts maximum pressure on Venezuela, does not allow it to get its own money from the IMF, seizes Venezuelan assets in the Bank of London, starves Venezuela of funds, does not allow Venezuela to sell oil. Maduro is now the president. He doesn't want to be there. He's not a corrupt person. The state cannot function. He has to get syringes into the country. The US did not allow them to buy syringes from India. There's the pandemic going on. People are getting COVID and dying. They open tracks to sell oil. You say, BBC will say corruption. I call it tracks to sell the oil. He had to bring in people who I would not personally want in a government, and nor would he, because they know how to do these things. You got to get the oil sold to somebody. You got to get a tanker to appear with a Panamanian flag that's going to carry your oil to some country, whatever. You got to find a way, some Havala way of getting the money to you. So corruption, of course there's corruption, but is it personal corruption? No. Of course this damages the system. Sanctions damages the system. It creates institutional corruption because you have to find new ways of surviving. The same thing is happening in Cuba. Every once in a while you hear that the Cuban minister has been arrested for corruption because it happens. It's not always personal aggrandizement. Mr. Maduro and his wife live in a very modest way. They are not, living with diamonds and things. He's not a drug lord, okay? I've been to his house, extremely modest. Been to the home of the son-in-law of Chavez, extremely modest, 2-bedroom, apartment. Extremely modest lives they live. There's no personal corruption. You don't see it. Of course, there's corruption amongst people who are doing the trading. There's a Venezuelan oil broker who lives in Dubai. Every once in a while on Instagram, his girlfriend posts pictures of their apartment. Yeah, it's grotesque. These are the middlemen. They make the money selling oil illegally. Okay, this is happening everywhere, my friends. If you're going to break a blockade, and let me tell you, people in Gaza know this. All kinds of smugglers and traffickers appear and they help you dig tunnels and whatever. It's not always disciplined. All kinds of shady elements have to be there to allow you to survive a blockade, a sanctions. So from 2015 to 2026, through the pandemic, this is how they survived. Alex Saab, for instance, now the Attorney General, was arrested by the United States, accused of corruption. Then they eventually released him. They were hoping he would give them material on Nicolas Maduro. Yeah, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. He's the Attorney General now in Venezuela. These guys are business people in Venezuela. Yeah, corruption is not the right word. It's what BBC and Transparency International throws around. If you didn't have a sanctions policy, you may be able to have a transparent trade regime. But if you're under sanctions, you don't have a transparent trade regime. Who imposed the lack of transparency? It wasn't the gangster. It was the other gangster. It was the US government. In the middle of all this, the military is extremely trained in Bolivarian ideology. You see them running around Caracas or Barquisimeto or Maracaibo. They're chanting slogans from Bolivar and so on. But they also live in a country under sanctions. So they are also struggling with impoverishment. The general standard of living collapsed. Last year, the growth rate in Venezuela was 6.5%. Very high. Why? Because it's recovering from the sanctions. Will the military crack and go against the government? I doubt it. I don't think the Americans will find generals who will betray the country. They haven't been able to find them. It's like the Americans have been looking for a Gorbachev in China, and they're not finding them. They're demonizing Chinese leaders because they're not becoming Gorbachev. You know, look at the experience of Palestine. Again, if you don't surrender to the Zionist settler colonial project, you're in jail. Yeah, I gave the names already. Marwan Barghouti is not in the Popular Front. He's not even in Hamas or Islamic Jihad. He's a Fatah member. What is he doing in jail? Yeah, it's because of his political orientation. You have an orientation, you go to jail. Same thing in these areas. They are looking for somebody to betray. So that's not happening. And the third question of Russia and China, I very much doubt that China will accept a division of the world. I very much doubt it. If they would have accepted that, the high representative of the Chinese government would not have been in Caracas during this attack. It just doesn't make sense. You see, it's embarrassing. I was on a TV show today and I did a long interview with the Chinese program today as well. 2 things with the Chinese media. And an article I wrote has already appeared in the Chinese media in Chinese. I argued to them that the nature of the meeting of Maduro with Xi and then the bombardment is as humiliating to the Chinese as the 1999 bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade by NATO. When NATO bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade in 1999, they humiliated China. This is as humiliating. If there was a Yalta, in Yalta when Churchill and so on were dividing the world up, if this was the consequence of a Yalta summit, United States gets the Western Hemisphere, Russia can take Europe, China can take... The Chinese are not going to agree to this because it doesn't make sense for their trade regime. We don't live in a world where you just trade in your bucket. The Chinese will not accept this. Now, would the Russians accept a deal where they are told you can have Ukraine, we want Venezuela? I don't know. Because the Russian regime, it's a different can of fish or kettle of fish than the Chinese. It's not ideologically motivated and factually motivated. I have great respect for the Russian leadership, but it doesn't come from that sort of background of a political program, 50-year plan. The Chinese think in 50, 100-year increments. I don't think that's happening in Russia. But I still doubt that Mr. Putin made a deal with the United States on this. I really doubt it. I just don't think they had the capacity to prevent this attack by the US.
Yeah, thanks, Vijay. I think you already mentioned, how, did people expect that the Chinese would risk a world war, let's say, or a third world war, or the Russians for that matter? And I think that's actually one of the questions that maybe I'll just read one last round of questions that really very appreciative of your time. So the first question is as follows. Do you think we are heading towards a third world war? I've already alluded to that. Is there a hidden message to the world from the arrest of the Venezuelan president? I'm just reading them as they are. Another question, how can we reconcile his status as a dictator who lacked popular support with the reality that many people nonetheless reacted positively to the US attack? And there's a question about, do I understand that the Tricontinental Conference in Cuba will take place on the 8th of January or not, given the events? Is there any other question from the audience just before we wrap up? في أي سؤال إضافي يا جماعة? Okay. I think we can take these, Vijay, and maybe just some final remarks.
Yeah. No, look, firstly, I'm so happy we had this time together, okay? I really am, because accumulating your questions is very helpful to me to think about what people are thinking about. Do you understand? This is a process of dialogue, and I wish we had even one more hour to do it for me selfishly. I mean, you have to do other things, but I'm thinking I would like to hear more. Firstly, forget the concept Third World War. It's meaningless.
Yeah.
Because those kind of territorial wars are not going to happen like that. The First and Second World War, in a way, was one long European war, which they took to the rest of the world. I mean, it was settling accounts within Europe between powers that were sort of nudging beyond national-based capitals. We are beyond that. We live in a world system. And there has been a major global set of wars and conflicts for the last 50 years. I mean, every time we ask, can there be, what we're asking when we say Third World War is we're asking, will the major nuclear powers, for instance, get into a conflict? Will the United States and China fight each other? I can tell you, I know the Chinese very well. I spend a lot of time there. They do not want a war. They are extremely averse to conflict. That is why they are sometimes so frustrating with their reaction to Palestine or Cuba. It frustrates me. I say to them, come on, you have so many ships. Fill up one of your ships with food and send it to Gaza. Forget these flotillas of hippies sitting on little boats. Send a whole big Chinese vessel. Yeah? Why not? What will the Americans do? Sink it? But they are conflict averse. They don't want to risk. They don't want a Cuban Missile Crisis, my friends. They are risk averse. They are not interested. Look how they deal with Taiwan. Frankly, in 1961, the Indian government didn't care about anything. It just invaded Goa, Daman and Diu, Portuguese colonies within India. India just invaded it with the military. Took it over, told Portugal, sorry, goodbye, go home. 1961. Nobody knows about this. The Chinese didn't even go into Macau. They waited till the treaty ended in Macau, in Hong Kong. Why did they wait? They should have gone into Hong Kong in 1949. They waited till 1997. Why are they waiting? It's crazy. They are extremely conflict averse. I can tell you that. They don't want a quote-unquote World War III. It's not going to happen. The message of the president, Nicolas Maduro, for instance, I mean, because I know him, I'm just saying, his message is going to be stand with Venezuela, defend Venezuela. He will say, I am a soldier, forget about me. I am a soldier. I'm not the central issue here. The main thing is defend Venezuela. If you need to make a tactical retreat, go ahead. But don't allow the Venezuelan project, the Bolivarian project, to surrender. And don't allow the Venezuelan people to die. It's the same, I would say. By the way, I'm speaking out of turn. But I've spoken recently, a lot saying, where are the Palestinian politics? Where is the project? Focus also on how the Israelis are not allowing Palestinian political leaders to communicate. They're jailing them, all of that. Yeah. I said a lot during this whole genocide. Why is it that people outside are the spokespersons for the Palestinians, but are not listening to the political leadership, of all the factions? So whatever. Yeah. The point I'm trying to make is we don't want our people to die. If you need to make a small concession to stop the slaughter, you will do it. You don't want the children to drown to death in Gaza, in Khan Yunis, in 3 feet of water or whatever. We will make a tactical concession to save everybody. That is exactly what leadership is about. That's what Maduro would say. I can tell you. That is the elementary lesson of leadership. Leadership is not save yourself and let your people die. Leadership is prevent everybody from dying. You make a tactical retreat. Don't force the struggle. Yeah? When weakness is detected, do not force the struggle. Then the question of dictator. Come on, friends. Dictator. Look at the words we sometimes have to use. Yeah? terrorist, dictator, jihadi, this, that, and the other. Yeah, who is a dictator? I mean, what politics do we have nowadays to select leadership? In which country is the system working well? Okay, in so-called liberal bourgeois democracies, so much money has taken over the system. It's a dictatorship of money. In India, 85% of the so-called campaign money goes to the far right-wing party. Okay, it's not a democracy in India. It's a monocracy. It's moneyocracy. Okay, it's rupeeocracy or whatever. You give it a name you want. What is a dictatorship? Yeah, I don't accept the idea of dictatorship or democracy. These terms mean nothing to me. I reject them. Is Israel a democracy? You know, they will say, well, there's an election. What? It's a country that is occupying human beings, giving them no rights, conducting a genocide. Yeah, but that's a democracy. You know, it's welcomed in the community of nations, so-called. Yeah, is that a democracy? It's not a democracy. In France, the left has the largest bloc in the parliament. But Emmanuel Macron, the president, will not allow the left to become the prime minister. What democracy? It's institutional capture. Yeah, what democracy? So I reject the idea of dictatorship. I was there in the last presidential election. Venezuelan elections are chaotic. All elections in Latin America are contested. There's a lot of chaos that goes on. Yeah, but let me tell you something. A majority of people in the country support the Bolivarian project. You travel anywhere, you see the rallies. There are no rallies in Caracas where people are celebrating what happened to Maduro. And one of the reasons is that Mr. Trump just summarily dismissed the Venezuelan opposition, saying, we will run the country. They are not capable. Maria Corina Machado, she may have got the Nobel Prize, stole it from me, but she is not capable of running the country. I mean, he just dismissed the opposition and said, we, the Americans, will run the country. What? People celebrating? No, they are with the Bolivarian project. 51%, that's enough for me, okay? That's a majority. So I don't even accept the terms that we are forced to use of liberal American political science given to us by Hannah Arendt and so on, authoritarianism, democracy. These make no sense to me today. I reject this whole conceptual apparatus. We need a new apparatus to understand legitimacy and leadership in countries. You know, was Fidel Castro a dictator? I don't think so. I don't think it functions like that. Yeah, I mean, what is dictatorship in the Arab world? You know, when in 1974, as a young boy, we went to Libya. You know, everybody in 1974, let me tell you, loved Gaddafi. Now, what he turned out after too many years of sitting there is a different matter. Was the coup of 1969 a dictatorship? Is Ibrahim Traore's coup in Burkina Faso a dictatorship? Was Nasser's coup in 52 a dictatorship? I reject this conceptual apparatus. I think we need to rethink how we understand, particularly in the global South. We need to rethink politics. We don't have a language for it. And finally, I am actually not involved in the Tricontinental Conference. It's the University of Nottingham in the UK. My team was actually rejected from a grant. So we couldn't even have gone to Cuba for the conference. We don't have the money. Contrary to social media lies about us, I don't get money from Soros. I don't get money from Goldman Sachs. I am not funded by the Chinese. In fact, we are having a really hard time raising money and might have to wrap up our institute in a year or so if we are not able to raise the funds. So we couldn't get the money to go. It's a University of Nottingham event, and nobody offered us plane tickets, which is really all we wanted, was plane tickets. 5 of us couldn't get them. So we of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, the heirs of the Tricontinental Conference, we could not have gone anyway to the conference in Havana organized by the University of Nottingham in the UK. In my view, this conference will be again mostly people from the global north because they'll have funding to go there. the rest of us, well, we'll have our own online things, I suppose. Yeah. We've just published, I think I only have the Spanish version, but you can get online for free, English version. This is a dossier for January on the Tricontinental Conference of 1966 and its meaning. It's freely available on our website. That's another problem. We make everything freely available, so we don't have a way to raise money. But anyway, I'm 100% for open access. So go ahead.
Vijay, I'll share that with our students for sure. And I do hope we all I think hope that the institute continues to function and continues to do the amazing work it's doing. It's a definitely difficult time to get funds. And Vijay, I think I just want to thank you for this. I think there are a lot of questions, of course, a lot of ideas that we have. I want to just to reiterate. I guess your answer, near the end is very important. We do need to rethink politics. I think in our part of the world, think a lot about the terms sometimes we are forced to use, or to think through. I think, for instance, how the media is portraying the arrest as an arrest of Maduro, while it's, it's state-sponsored kidnapping, state-sponsored violence that has been taking place not just today in January, but for decades, of course. I see questions being posted, Vijay, but I want to spare you the time. I just say that your talk rose many questions. We will have it live and stream. People will be able to stream it later on our YouTube and Facebook page. And Vijay, I just want to thank you a lot again for this. I don't know if you have any final kind of thoughts you want to share with us before we end.
Listen, okay. Here's what I would really like to say. I would love to teach an online class for the students one day. Like a seminar just for students, maybe 3 classes on the Global South, and I'll do it for free. I would love to do that.
Vijay, consider it done. I'll send you an email today, okay? We'll start planning it.
Okay, right? Done. Yeah, I would love to. It would be an absolute joy. Yeah.
We would love to have you. Thanks a lot, Vijay, again. And thanks to Mary. شكرا ميري للترجمة وشكرا للجميع للحضور ومرة أخرى شكرا لفيجي. يعطيكم العافية. تصبحوا على خير.
Yeah, Mary. Thanks a lot, Mary.
Yes,
where is Mary? Let's have a look at Mary. Where is Mary?
Mary, خلينا نشكرك. Here she is.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Bye. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
Bye.
Until soon. Ciao.